So, the following program is brought to you by Haymarket Books. And at a time like this, radical ideas are obviously needed more than ever. And Haymarket, as well as producing these virtual events, brings out books by Arundhati Roy, Keeanga Yamada Taylor, Angela Davis, Naomi Klein, and many other wonderful writers. And if you're moved by any of the program that you're about to see, you can support the work of Haymarket by buying their books from their own website. And even better, you can join the Haymarket Book Club.
Beautiful. Hello, everybody. Welcome, and thank you for joining us from around the world for this conversation. This is an Uprising. We currently have folks joining us from as far away places as Dublin, Los Angeles, Chicago, Honolulu, Chile, DC, Kenya, Minneapolis, the Bay Area. I'm told the entire Bay Area, okay, is plugged in. Puerto Rico's in the house, Vancouver, Scotland, Alabama. So we've got a lot of the world plugged into this very important conversation with two people who I am thrilled to be talking with. So thank you all for joining us. My name is Khury Petersen-Smith. I'm in Boston, Massachusetts, and I will be hosting today's conversation. Before I introduce our speakers, I want to thank the organizer of this teach-in, Haymarket Books. We need bold, radical ideas right now. It's critical that we support independent publishers and bookstores, and Haymarket is the raddest publisher around. Now, you can support Haymarket and your independent bookstores and publishers in a number of ways. First of all, you can buy books directly from Haymarket. Go to haymarketbooks.org or find your books find their books at your local bookshop. Second, you can join the Haymarket Books Book Club, which is all at the website. And third, if you're in a position to make a donation, no matter how small via Venmo, there will be a card on screen about how to do this, and folks posting that information in the YouTube chat as well. Donations from tonight's event will benefit both Haymarket and the Atlanta Solidarity Fund. We know that our Femme in Atlanta is in the streets right now and need our solidarity and support. And so we are really grateful to be supporting our comrades as they fight for justice in Atlanta. This video will be recorded and shared afterward on the Haymarket Books YouTube channel. Please go ahead and subscribe to that channel, like this video now, and share it with as many people as possible. And consider following Haymarket and our speakers on their social media channels and signing up on the Haymarket newsletter. As somebody who follows Haymarket and these speakers on social media, you will not be sorry. I want to let everyone know about two upcoming events in this live stream series. First of all, tonight, right after we're done with this conversation, at 7 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, tune in for Homemade, this incredible poetry series, an online poetry event for the people with Aja Monet, amazing poet out of Florida. And we'll post the link in the chat. And then tomorrow, Katrina Johnson, Michael Bennett, Nikita Oliver and Jesse Hagopian will be talking about justice for Charlena Lyles and Black Lives Matter. On June 18th, Ibram X. Kendi and Dereka Purnell will be discussing raising anti-racist kids. And you can register for both of those events on Eventbrite. Few housekeeping items. With so many people joining this call, we may need your patience if we have any technical issues. If your stream gets choppy, it might help to reduce your image quality. Folks will give instructions on how to do that in the chat. If our YouTube feed is interrupted for any reason, you may need to navigate back to the YouTube Haymarket Books page. The feed should resume there in case of interruption. We are providing live closed caption on this call, so click CC button to enable this feature. Thank you for Mirabai Knight for providing this live closed captioning. And we should have some time for Q&A. Beautiful. Please go ahead and post your questions on the live video feed wherever you're watching it, and we will get to those later in the program. If you want to turn off the comment stream, you can just close the comments window. That all said, it is my pleasure, my honor to bring in Boots Riley and Noname. Boots Riley is a creative powerhouse, founder and frontman of the legendary hip-hop group The Coup, the creator of the incredible movie Sorry to Bother You. Noname, an incredible creative person, amazing musician out of Chicago, the incredible Chicago music scene, who's not only an amazing musician, but also creator of the Noname Book Club, which is an online and in real life community dedicated to lifting up POC voices. The club does this by highlighting 2 books each month written by authors of color. Noname's Book Club, you can join it at nonamebooks.com. When people are able to gather, people in Noname's Book Club meet up at independent bookstores. Noname's Book Club is hooked up with, I counted 12 different library systems in 12 different cities, public library systems. So if your public library is not connected with a Noname Book Club, like, what are they doing? Let's, get connected. So these are these amazing people who we get to talk to tonight. On the subject of the uprising that is currently unfolding in this country and is shooting off sparks that have caught fire all around the world. And the first thing I wanted to know from the two of you is what has been the most inspiring thing so far, or whether something you've seen so far or something that you see coming out of this uprising. What is inspiring you about it? Maybe you can set us off, Noname.
I think, what's inspiring? I think I'm inspired by a lot of things. I think I immediately want to say I'm inspired by people's fearlessness. I think it's inspiring to see people being brave enough to go against the full weight of the fucking U.S. empire. Militarized police, like, people are brave enough to sacrifice their bodies in these moments. That is inspiring to me. I think seeing that there is a level of revolutionary potential in this American society right now is inspiring, even though I think these uprisings won't be sustained if we don't have organization and a political education and a politic behind it. But I do think it's important to see that there is a collective power, and I think there's a rage that has a lot of potential if moved in a specific or particular direction. So I'm inspired by that, and I'm just inspired by the amount of mutual aid projects that have sprung up, and how many people have sort of took it upon themselves, whether they have done activism in the past or not, to just provide. And we can see that there's a level of solidarity that can remind us that we don't necessarily need these things coming from the state. I think it's showing us that we can take care of our communities in specific ways. So we need to see that. I think that's sort of collective unity around people's day-to-day material needs.
Beautiful. Boots, what's inspiring you?
Well, one of the things is that what's going on now is at such a higher level than what we've seen in decades past. You know, many of us coming up in public schools are and even in universities are taught to, you know, basically worship the civil rights movement, right? We talk about, and that period of the 60s even too, like we talk about all those things that were going on then, but, you know, you look at the March on Washington, which was, you know, it was actually a tiny bit more radical than they say it was, because it was a March on Washington for jobs and justice. But that was only 200,000 people, right? And even in the early 2000s, we had millions of people on the street going against the Iraq War. And this is a development from that to where, you know, we've got people in all of the big cities, in all the little towns. You got little towns with population 10,000, where 2,000 people can't come out for the Black Lives Matter thing. You got, you know, you got towns in Ohio where the restaurant workers don't want to give the police discount, and the restaurant workers do work stoppages to make that happen. You got things are in a place where everyone's they know that they have to do something, and so they're doing that part, and everyone's looking for the leverage point. And speaking to Noname's point about the potential for what that could be, is when you look at, you know, other actual revolutions, you know, just like there are periods like this that have to do with people going from street actions to looking for more for more substantial power plays. So, for instance, a lot of times when we hear about Cuba, we hear about, you know, okay, Fidel and Che came over on a boat and they had guns and they did all this, but it had moved from street rebellions to a general strike.
Right.
You know, and some of those forces that were putting together those things weren't all revolutionary, but it moved it forward to a revolutionary position. And you have that even in Vietnam, you know, with the revolution there. These are things that can move things forward. Another hopeful thing to me is like, and it's symbolic for right now, but the longshoremen on the West Coast on the 19th are shutting down the ports on the West Coast in solidarity with the longshoremen on the Gulf Coast. So both those coasts are going to be shut down on the 19th. And it's a symbolic one-day action. But those symbols are how things start and how those messages get across, you know, where people are looking for, okay, in this economic system, where is our power? And, you know, and there are other questions that people are figuring out. What are we asking for? What are we, you know?
Yeah.
And things like that. But just that spirit of movement, of figuring all that out is exciting.
Beautiful. So exciting. Did you have something, Noname?
Oh no, I was saying I agree. I totally agree. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you all put a lot on the table. So let's, because this is it's good. You know, just one of the things I'm thinking about in anticipating our conversation, you know, I've been thinking a lot about radical ideas and radical action, and what's the connective tissue between those two things, you know? And it strikes me that the two of you have done so much, I think, to try to make those connections, to have radical ideas be more and more accessible to ordinary people. So I would really love to talk to you more about that tonight. And maybe I'll start by saying, what Boots was just saying about things being on a higher level, that for me, that's both in terms of the militant activity, but also it seems to me that people have been reading something. You know what I mean? Like since the Ferguson uprising, I feel like people have been reading, and I see signs at the protests that refer to intersectional feminism, or prison abolition. So, from where you all sit, I'm curious about what you think has happened between, the Ferguson uprising, 2014, and now. Both of you are talking about how a bunch of different factors have coming together to make this what it is. And I'm really curious, if we take a step back, like, what do you all see that led up to this point?
I don't know. It's interesting that you say that you feel like from Ferguson there's been like a radicalization. Is that a word? Like people have become radicalized since, and I think a lot of people in that moment did become radicalized, but I think unfortunately, because of how popular mainstream media works and functions, I feel like a lot of the radical politics that should have been centered in that movement kind of got caught in, like, I don't know, liberal propaganda. I don't know. I don't really feel that. It's interesting because I feel like if that were the case, if things were more radical, then we wouldn't be surprised about words like abolition, words like defunding. And it's this constant, like, looping and trying to explain to people what this terminology means, which is totally fine. But I think maybe there was a group of organizers who were deeply connected to that movement when it comes to Ferguson, that are the people who I'm looking to now. But in terms of the general public, I don't know. I don't really think so. Half the time I'm thinking I'm not tapping in enough with the political resources that I'm trying to provide and learning and engaging. The folks in my community, the folks who are in my family, like, and not just my immediate family, but my entire family, they're not all like politicized or thinking radically. I think a lot of them are still watching television and getting their information and their news from those sources. So I feel like maybe this wasn't the right response to what you said, but yeah, I don't know. I wish I did feel more like, yeah, we're on the right track and going where we need to be going. And maybe I'm just trapped in Twitter also. I'm constantly just going back and forth with people explaining what I think is just humane ideas, like, people should not be like sent away and locked in cages, and we should be abolishing these systems of policing, including ICE and detention centers and like, it's I don't know. Sorry. Go ahead, Boots. Take it away, Boots.
I think, I agree that all those, all those ideas that you just represented that are out there exist. But I think, there's just like a relational thing, a comparative thing of where people were to where they are, and whether it has to do with Ferguson or not.
Right.
That's a question. But I think what does happen with things like Ferguson and not just Ferguson, but anti-war movement or any number of anti-racist struggles, is because for the last 40 or 50 years, people have been very anti-party, anti-organization. What has flourished are nonprofit organizations, and many led by radicals with good hearts. But what this does is it sets up a thing where the folks who get the money set the agenda for the way, the way the political campaign goes.
Right.
And that money is usually given with parameters, right? And so we've seen, and I'm not talking about just since Ferguson, but since the 70s at least, and yeah, where we have when even when the public wants to get more radical, if it's not in line with certain organizations' agenda or what their mission statement is. And again, these mission statements are often created with good intention and good purpose, and some folks that might, that were like, hey, I got out of college, I have these radical ideas. How do I get a job with these ideas? Right. And one place to do that, instead of working at, Bechtel is working at, a nonprofit. And it poses a problem. It's the same reason why while I was coming up, I wouldn't have wanted to work at a commercial jingle place. I would rather work at telemarketing or something like that, because that commercial jingle place will fuck up my music, right? Because I'm doing, I'm like, oh, I am working in music, right? And it just kind of messes that up. And I think similarly, what we see is we have movements that end up not being led by folks that have parameters on them. Folks that have parameters put on them and have been trained in ways of looking at things that don't have to do with building a movement that could dismantle this system. Right. I think it's the concessions. I think it's the reform that people, the incremental changes that people kind of get hung up on and wanting to see, which I totally get. It'd be nice to see those, those small little victories, to know that we're not just being mercilessly murdered by the state. But at the same time, if we're not, I don't understand how we can ultimately dismantle any of it if we don't stick to a intensely radical politic. You know what I mean? Like if imperialism and colonialism is not centering our conversations, I don't see it. And I feel like that's kind of where we are right now. The talking heads, the people who have the mic, the celebrities who are, at these events and shit. No shade to anybody. People got to do them. But at the same time, it becomes it just becomes convoluted, and I don't think you can call it radical at that point. If it's not really challenging capitalism, if it's not even naming it, people are not even saying that word, especially the people who ultimately like benefited from it the most. But those are the people who are sort of like leading these marches. It's weird. It's hard to watch it happen. I'm like, yeah. Well, so what I would say that, there is often put up this idea of it's reform or revolution, but that's not historically how it's happened. There's always reform and revolution. Like if you're going to have a revolution, you have to get people involved in fighting. Like you can't win them over and then they fight. Because by the time you do all the winning them over and they read all the books they're supposed to read and stuff, then their life is a certain way. So you gotta go ahead. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. So you got to get people involved in a fight and show people how to win. Like, how can you win? And in order to do that, and that's kind of, and without, there's a theory to that, but there's also just historical evidence from, whether it's Soviet Union, China, Cuba, Vietnam, all these places that whatever people's thought are and what happened after the revolution, they were able to make a revolution. They were able to go from community organizing to get millions of people involved in fighting. But don't you think like a radical politic was at the center of that organizing though? Well, I'm not against I do, but okay, go ahead. Oh, no, go ahead. I understand that reform is, a necessary process on the road to, revolution. I don't think we're just going to wake up tomorrow, take our guns without
any sort of incremental, changes. That's just completely unrealistic. But I think if our framing and our thinking about reform is based in damn near like a capitalist, like we just need them not to kill us in front of us. Like if it's not centered in a revolutionary, radical idea and total shift, I don't think people, when they're making these reforms, they're truly centered in the idea of a real revolution. I think they're thinking we just need to not get murdered. Yeah. But the society as it functions can stay the same,
Yeah, I agree with all of those sentiments. I would say the question comes in what that actually means on the ground on a day-to-day basis. Like there are people that are like, hey, I'm going out today to fight. I don't know about, whether I'm already sold on revolution or not, but this is what I'm one to. And do we say, you don't got it right then? Or do we say, okay, cool.
I say pull up to book club. That's what I say. I say, hey, pull up on me. Pull up to book club.
Yeah.
And let's have conversation in tandem with going out to marches and protests and sit in and whatever else we do with our physical bodies to resist. But yeah, I say let's sit in a circle and read these books together. That's what I always say.
I agree with that. And I would just say that go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead.
No,
Maybe we should let him moderate because we're just gonna keep doing that.
I mean, this is gold. So I'm like, I don't want to interfere, but I don't know. I so feel what both of you are saying. First of all, first of many things, I really appreciate actually that you've put on the table the many obstacles that tend to keep us from going as far, I think, as we're going right now. You know what I mean? Like so, we know that the police are against us. We know that all they have for us is violence. We're seeing that. But it's not just the brute force of the state. We're dealing with, how has activism been organized for the past years and decades? That's something that we have to grapple with. Mm-hmm. What are the ideas that people have going into the streets? I think that's really important because in this country, I think in a particular way, and especially if you're people of color, our radical history is stolen from us. You know what I mean? Like there are countries where people know that what working people and oppressed people they have because they fought and they won it. And that's something that is denied us. So I think there's so much that we have to kind of rediscover and uncover. So I feel, I really appreciate that you all are putting those things on the table. And one of the things I wanted to circle back to is this process of radicalization, because like I've been fascinated, for example, by, all across the country, there are places where, protesters are asking police to kneel with us, right? It's this kind of like appeal to, can you connect with us, right? It's not there's something radical about that, but it's not revolutionary in the sense that it's not saying the police are my enemy. It's saying, can we be friends, right? And I've seen images shared on social media of like, look at the police kneeling with us, and then people comment underneath, yeah, those same police were tear gassing us 45 minutes later. Right. That radicalizes you, right? Like however, the way the ideas people left the house with in the morning, I think they came back, with some different ideas. So. But I wanted to go back to what Boots was saying about the nonprofit industrial complex too, because I share the sentiment that, of course there are people involved in the nonprofit world for the best reasons. Of course, there's amazing, urgent work being done by all kinds of excellent organizations. But I do think that many of us have become used to these campaigns that are very kind of crafted and, events that are scripted and, the meeting with the powers that be behind closed doors. There's a certain way of doing things, right? That they've been done. And I think this is so disruptive. I think that's what's so powerful. That's why I love the title of this thing. This is an uprising, because people are like, yo, we're gonna burn some you know what I mean? Like we're gonna shake some things up.
Yeah.
And the truth is, it's working. Do you know what I mean? Like those cops got charged. In Seattle, they seized part of the city and they are in control of it now. So, yeah.
Didn't they disband the police in Minneapolis? Were the police
talking about it?
Yeah, I mean, that's like the fact that that's even a conversation piece. Like that's something that's actually like, people are critically thinking about these things in terms of realistic structural changes in particular cities. That's revolutionary. That's dope. But it's like you said, when it comes to, that's a great example when it comes to people kneeling with the cops and taking photos with the cops and stuff like that, I think comes from not having a full understanding of police as agents of the state and protecting particular interests, property and whatnot,
And I think that's a great example right there, showing what you're talking about analysis. Where are folks' analysis in where they stand versus where the police stands? And that's when, just to put another, music analogy out there, there used to be a time, everybody talks about Oakland hip hop and there's all these legends and all this kind of shit. But there was a time before that when it was very fledgling, where we had to rent out restaurants and shit like that to perform because there was no venues and stuff like that. And where people were starting to come, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, during that time, sometimes people wouldn't be getting the crowd hyped, right? And, there'd be all these shows where there's all these performers, somebody be like, man, the crowd is dead. And just because I had been an organizer before that point in my life, I understood that if the crowd was dead, it's my fault.
Right.
Right?
Right.
I haven't figured out what it is to communicate to that crowd, to get them on the wavelength that I am. I haven't figured out how to adjust what I'm doing and all that. So going from that standpoint, a lot of what I think that organizing is taking people through an experience that teaches them something, right? Because you can have the book club and that works for some folks, but sometimes, you might read something and you don't get it until you've gone through it. It's just like that song you heard on the radio that you hated, but then you hear it at the club and you're like, oh shit, I really never heard it in this way, right? And because it's in the right context and you've gone through it. So often what organizers are trying to do is take a group of people through an experience that shows a lesson. And I kind of carry that over to my art. And I think that there are certain kinds of campaigns that the radical left has stayed away from because they're not as glamorous, that would be teaching these analyses without just having to be like, here are the rules. This person is on that side. That person is on this side. That will get to a lot of people. But there are some people that have to be like, fuck, we was on strike and the boss was in the wrong and the police came out on their side. To realize what the function of the police is. That's one of the things. But so I believe that people's misunderstanding of that, of the police, has to do obviously with the media, things like that. The fact that we're born watching cop shows and shit like that, where they're the heroes. So that's part of it. But then on the other side of it, us not getting that narrative across, the other narrative across, has to do with the call outs that we've done, the campaigns, like, which this is a development. People saying, let's talk about the whole function of the police and do we need them? But up until now, it's been get rid of this murderous cop, get rid of that murderous cop. And the police have been, and often the cities that support them have been good at like guiding us. Like, so Oakland, like 20 years ago, had this case called the Oakland Riders. They called it the Oakland Riders. These cops were going around just putting coke on people and putting them to jail over and over. Mm-hmm. And some rookie cop called them out on it and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, Jerry Brown, who's supposed to be the liberal mayor, like said, oh, it's not all cops. It's just this group of folks. Let's call them the Oakland Riders. But it was the whole Oakland Police Department doing it, right?
Right.
And so everybody took that, like, let's get rid of the Riders. Let's get rid of the Oakland Riders. Mm-hmm. All that kind of stuff. And so we've done that. We've like made our campaigns be about these things. And partially it's because those are things we can handle. Maybe we can get this cop fired. Maybe we can get this one cop put in jail. But some of that, so some of that confusion from folks has to do with that, and has to do with us needing to engage in campaigns that not only win, but teach how to fight when winning, and teach who's on, who they're fighting. But anyway.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I have I've got some amazing questions coming in here that I would love to get to for both of you. But first, before I forget, one question is, I'm curious, we're talking about ideas. I'm curious about what, if you all are reading anything, any books, either at the moment or a go-to that you recommend for folks to check out.
I'll let you go.
Man, I'm just reading scripts right now. I'm not really, I haven't, books about what though? Like, that's the big question.
Yeah, I guess, if there are books that are kind of speaking to you in this moment or that you recommend, that's cool. If not, that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, it'll come to me as we're talking more.
Cool. We'll get to your scripts, by the way. There's a bunch of questions about what creative work looks like in this time. So for both of you, so we'll get to that.
I was reading Blood in My Eye by George Jackson, because that's our June pick. Kind of took a break from reading, to be honest. I do recommend that book. I love that book. I've more so just been watching a bunch of videos trying to understand what racial capitalism is, and I haven't been able to fully get into Black Marxism. It's so dense, and I'm not smart enough, but I've been reading a lot of watching a lot of lectures breaking down the material in that book. So that's where I've been at.
Speaking of someone that uses that term, Robin D.G. Kelley has a lot of.
Yeah, that's mainly who I've been watching. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Shout out Robin Kelley. I just gotta say, Noname's brilliant. That book, Black Marxism is intimidating, but
it's so dense.
But we will all challenge ourselves. So let me, if it's okay, there's a number of questions about your artistic practices, and if we can switch gears a little bit, I think we'll probably circle back to the Uprising unfolding, but there's a bunch of questions about the creative work that you all do, and so. And I hope I get folks' names right, as somebody whose name is always messed up. Khury is how you pronounce it. It's okay.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. I'm just taking this opportunity to tell the whole world. It's Khury. Okay, so Kayla Donnell asks, how do you all find the resources and motivation to create radical experimental Black art in a white artistic bubble? And then maybe a similar question that I'm going to add. Manny Hernandez asks, can you give some advice to people working in a capitalist entertainment industry that are trying to make radical anti-capitalist content?
You want to go ahead?
You go first.
I don't think any of my art prior to maybe the last song that I released was really radical. I think a lot of my art, because I wasn't radicalized until after I had released my first 2 projects. And I think a lot of my art is pro-Black. I think a lot of my art is very, very pro-Black, and it's very based in telling my personal experiences with Black plight and Black trauma. I wouldn't say that it's radical. Like, I wouldn't say that it's, because for me, radical means like calling out specific systems, and being anti-imperialist, and connecting the Black American struggle to Black struggles globally, and to be a part of those resistance movements as well. And this, in my art, never ever touched any of that. So I can't really say I know how to make radical art in this moment. I know that I'm not making any art because I've just been, to be quite honest, depressed the past 2 weeks. I have not created. I've just been tucked away in my apartment. I would love to create, though. I really would. I don't even know if I would be in a place to just be making a bunch of political content, though, because I would almost take music as a moment to escape for a second. I'm sure I would, because naturally my shit is always just like, ugh. But yeah. I haven't been doing shit. I suck.
What you said you got radicalized after you were already making music. What was that? What made that happen?
The internet called me out. I was one of those, like, I was romanticizing Black Wall Street and Tulsa, and was like, capitalism. I think the tweet was like, capitalism isn't evil capitalists are evil. Capitalism is a tool. And I think, for one, I didn't understand what capitalism was fully. And I also was coming off the experience of like supporting my family off of having money. So for me, I was like, well, this is, I'm looking at Nipsey, and I'm looking at all these other people who are preaching Black entrepreneurship. And I'm like, hell yeah, I can get a bunch of money, take that shit right back to my neighborhood, and we can build from the ground up, and we can build wealth in our communities. And this will be the, our answer to the social issues that really capitalism and white supremacy have created. And yeah, the internet basically destroyed me for Twitter specifically. And that's kind of what led me on the journey of reading. Like, I literally only started the book club because I was publicly learning, and I knew that I wasn't the only person who did not know what the shit meant, because there were people under that comment like, hell yeah, that's exactly what we need to be doing. So I'm like, okay, well, let's make this a learning experience for like all of us who are confused. Because and I was reading, like, I started off with like Pedagogy of the Oppressed and a bunch of other shit, and I'm like, I kind of wanted to just have a space where I could have a community to help me through the ideas, because I didn't have a professor, or I haven't gone to college or anything. So yeah, that was long-winded, but yeah.
Along with that same thing, I joined a revolutionary party when I was 14. And so I was gung-ho and reading, like, quote unquote, reading everything. Like,
right.
Whether I was understanding it or not is a whole different thing, right? And we had reading groups and study groups and all that kind of stuff. But I realized it wasn't until later, when I got involved in actual campaigns and things where I was trying to get people to do things, that then the ideas clicked for me, and I don't think that's how everyone learns, but there's there is a thing where there's theory and practice, and there's this new word that was created in the last bunch of decades called praxis, which which really, you can't have theory without practice, and you can't have practice without theory. So it's really a way for academics to say, well, right now I'm doing my theory, and later I'll do my praxis or whatever. Because the truth is, if I'm sitting here at my desk developing theory and not out being part of things, then my theory is going to be influenced by me sitting here at my desk, right? And same way as my practice is going to be influenced by that sort of thing. So I think what you're talking about, that trying to understand, is just the natural way that we all develop, which is like these theories we start being able to divine out what works and what doesn't when we're in struggle. When we're, you see a lot of organizations splitting up at times when not much is going on over theoretical questions. And usually when not much is going on, because, it's so focused on
theory,
the theory, as opposed to which theory works.
Right. Apply in the real world with real people. Yeah.
And not that it doesn't all, there's exceptions to that, but so often, and right now is an interesting time, because going to what Khury was talking about, asking about before, about, the development and the place that we're at, like, when I was a teenager and I started saying that I'm a communist, like, for most people, in the Black community, there was never a bunch of anti-communism. People would just be like, okay, that's cool. What does that mean about me getting paid? Whatever. I don't, what I'm saying? They'd be like, what does that have to do with me? That sort of a thing. But it definitely there wasn't a big movement happening, and people either didn't know what the word socialism meant, or any number of things like that. But you get to a time when all these polls say 51% of millennials would rather have socialism. And even if you go to I don't know what they call the generation after millennials, but that's even bigger, whatever. And it has something to do with all these campaigns that have been going on and all that kind of stuff. But it also, there's an element of it where people are getting it from the internet, and they're on the internet arguing with each other. They've read maybe more, than I have or whatever, and they're arguing over what Lenin said in this one letter to somebody. In this and that, and it becomes, because it's stuck on the internet,
right?
It becomes almost like these writings are the Bible, right? And and that's how you divine it out, as opposed to, and so some of the, and I'm saying that while it's very inspiring that you got all these like teenagers and stuff like that now being like, I'm ready. This is what I'm in for. This is what I'm doing. That's the other side of it, is like, it has to get out into the real world. They have to get involved in trying to make those ideas happen, and see what works out of it and what doesn't. And but yeah.
So what about you? What about your art? What is your radical process? Wasn't that the question? Like how are you radically?
In a white artistic bubble. Is that what?
Imperialist, fucking
settler,
colonial. Yeah.
I mean, you can only speak from where you are. That's all you're ever doing. Right? That's all you're ever doing. And so there's the question of what you believe, and then there's a question of who you're communicating to.
Right.
And trying to figure that out, right? Like, and then, some of that comes with an assessment, right? So, for instance, there's this authenticity argument that comes, like, what art is real Black art? What art is this? What art is representative? And some of that is more theoretical, like where do these ideas come from, and that's not the part that I'm talking about. But some of it is like, okay, this rapper is really for Black folks because Black folks listen to this rapper. And this blah, 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 this, and there's always this discussion. It comes up all the time. But the truth is, whatever you're selling in the United States, most of your market is white kids.
Facts.
Right?
This is why I quit rapping. Yeah.
You could be selling Nikes. You could be selling T-shirts. You could be selling bean pies. Right? If you sell a certain amount of them, your market is white kids, right?
Even bean pies?
Well, I'm saying if you sell a certain amount,
like quantity that you're moving, the amount of products.
And that's just because that's the demographic of the United States. And this is true for, musically, Jay-Z, most of his artists, white kids. Beyonce, most of their art, white kids. The difference comes in the marketing, because the smart record labels know to market your stuff to white kids as if white kids don't listen to it, right? We've seen this in the past. We've seen this. I'll say this. For instance, I actually think Eminem is a technically good rapper, but I saw what happened along the way, which was Interscope thought, okay, white kids aren't going to buy a white rapper, right? And we think maybe Black kids won't either. We know there's a large group of white kids that buy what they think Black folks buy. Mm-hmm. And there's not something wrong with that. People are like, everybody's trying to figure out what's real, what
authentic.
Yeah, and not even just authentic to Black people, but in this world where we've got this exploitive system and everything, like, what's some art that's heartfelt and talking the truth? So you're going to look to the group of folks that you see as most oppressed and be like, what are they talking about? And it's happened in every culture, right? Matter of fact, KRS-One put out an album called Blueprint, which was speaking to that specific idea, right? Mm-hmm. And the point is that with that situation, Interscope had already signed Eminem. We hear all the stories about Dr. Dre discovering Eminem. Eminem was already signed to Interscope. They were like, how are we going to sell this dude? And they made a deal with Dr. Dre because his cosign, it wasn't really about his cosign getting Black folks to buy it, but his cosign told white kids that this is what Black folks will buy, right? And so the whole idea, and there's this record, this book called Sweet Soul Music by Peter Guralnick. And it's about Stax Records, right? And more, it's about how in the 60s, like, it was known that Motown was about, like, selling Black culture to white kids. Like, they had smoothed everything out. They had changed certain chord things. They changed the way they had a class for how you stand so you don't seem, threatening and all that kind of stuff, right? This was like common knowledge. So this author talks about, well, in Boston, they were like, well, we know that that's the Black music for white people, right? But we want the real stuff. So let's listen to Stax Records, Otis Redding, Isaac Hayes, who else? The Bar-Kays, all these folks, Booker T, the MGs and all this kind of stuff. And they were like, look, this is real Black music and we want to support that. We want to support, because Stax Records was thought of as a little bit more rough and more funky and this and that. And so this book is him interviewing all those people, the musicians, the singers, the producers, the record label owners. And they all unequivocally said, what are you talking about? We were trying to sell music to white kids because we wanted to have a hit record. We want to make money because we're broke, and that's the market. That's what the market is. And so, and that was engineered toward that. So this idea that there's some sort of authenticity that's separated from your material conditions of how you, now let's talk about Stax Records and Motown. Stax Records, more than Motown Records, is like the foundation of all these samples that ended up being hip hop in the 90s and stuff like that. It itself being, coming from these things. So there's this myth that you can somehow separate the art you create from the material conditions of the world. And it's not true. And actually, and then there becomes this authenticity argument about what's the real Black music. So for instance, with the coup, if you listen to our first couple albums, we were a very local group, like hadn't traveled that much or whatever, And now if you listen to it, you won't notice it. But a lot of the words that we were using back then had not traveled out of the Bay Area. So a lot of what we were saying, we're using slangs and stuff like that people just didn't, even Black folks in other areas didn't know, right? Mm-hmm. And so, like one reviewer tried to say that I created a word called finna, right?
Wow.
And and it definitely did not create it. And I was like, what is going on? But so music that didn't do that and that could get to certain reviewers in a different way was thought of, like more authentic because it was speaking a language that, like, we were thought of as apolitical on our first album because our stuff didn't sound like the Bomb Squad, right? The Bomb Squad was Public Enemy's producer and all that kind of stuff. And they had this sort of chaos sound to them. And we were making music that we thought people would bump. It was real slow. Our first album was very slow, like so that people could bump it in their car or whatever. But people weren't used to that. So they called it, they did a review of our first song, Not Yet Free, which was saying it's more gangster rap from Oakland, right? The point is that this, just even bolstering this discussion more, there's a interview, 1976.
Boots, I'm digging it. You know what I mean? It's like a whole like people's history of what I mean, like Black music. And I'm also like aware of time.
Okay.
But
cool.
You were
let me wrap this up. Like
George, I want to circle back to something.
George Clinton, who said that who we know as Parliament Funkadelic being the epitome of Black music. In 1976, he's complaining because he's saying before this hit record they had right then, everybody was saying their music was white music.
Right.
Right. And he threw out this thing, which was at the same time in the same interview, talking about Teddy Pendergrass, who is another thing that people claim as the epitome of Black music. And he talks about George Clinton talks about in that interview then that all of that music is really just white pop music from the 50s with a Black person singing on it. And he points out all the chord changes and all that. And, so the point is that you just make art from where you are and with what you have. And if you feel it, and if you're being honest with yourself, you feel it and somebody else is going to feel it. And you make adjustments like, is my audience feeling this or whatever? That's something that you do. But you have to just make it from an honest place, and that's all you can do.
Yeah. That's actually, I mean, there's so much on the table, but I really appreciate that takeaway. And also, I hope we can all have more conversation in the future about, the history and the direction of art and music. I wanted to circle back, though, to something both of you did and Noname started, and just really recognize a gift that you gave us, because what happened was, we started out this conversation by talking about, for people who are revolutionaries, what do we see as unfolding right now, both in terms of what's inspiring, but also in terms of how we're going to go further, right? And then, which you did, Noname, like you switched at one point to actually narrating your own experience of how you got radicalized.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think that's really important because, once we become radical, and this is, I love all of my radical comrades,
Yeah.
but it's actually not hard to pontificate on the internet. You know what I mean? About radical.
Right.
It's much more challenging to think, how do these radical ideas actually move people?
Mm-hmm.
So I just really, I think it's really helpful because it's complicated. It's complicated. And I wonder if you can, you started to speak about why you created this book club. And I wonder if you could talk more about your hopes for it, your ambitions for it.
My ambitions for book club. I mean, we're in 12 cities right now. We have one chapter, one international chapter in London. So I think it's hard. It's hard because we're in the middle of or maybe not the middle anymore. I guess we're coming towards the end of a pandemic. So we haven't been able to have our typical meetups, and I think that's sort of the bread and butter of what it is that we do. We do have our virtual meetings, but I think what was powerful and really impactful was building community around just ideas and things that we were reading. So if I can continue to expand upon that, that would be dope. But I think for me, it's I struggle with thinking that I'm doing enough. I think that's where a lot of my anxiety comes from. And now that I'm working more in an organizing context, there's sometimes it's the battle between understanding and really feeling deeply the importance of political education, because it's ultimately, it's completely changed my life to just to have context. I think being born Black or being born in any sort of marginalized community, you have an inherent understanding of the violence against you as just a person walking in the world who is different, whether that's, you are Black or you are trans or whatever it is. There's this deep knowing that the state does not fuck with you, whether you have the political language around it or not. And I think that, I don't know, I feel like to have that, but then on top of that, to have a vocabulary and a history that you get from books, especially when you were kind of talking about really digging into and knowing the history of other revolutions that have happened and knowing that this is a continual struggle. That shit is mad important, but also people need food. As much as you know what I mean? It's it's always this battle of I really do believe that shit is life changing. Political education is my favorite shit. But what is a bunch of books gonna do for the niggas in my fucking neighborhood right now? So I think that's always been my battle. And I never really I feel like if my work is not primarily in the practice of praxis, the theory and practice, then I'm not tapping in. And all the organizers who I engage with on a day-to-day basis, they are either, organizers, or they do organizing work specifically for PIC abolition, prison industrial complex abolition. And they're on the ground, in the community, day to day, engaging with the people and shit. So I think until I'm doing that, until I'm fully tapped in with my community, I don't feel like my politic is as radical, or that book club is as, ooh, great, a book club. I personally won't feel like we're tapping in until I'm making some of those changes. I don't know. A lot of ideas, I don't know if I was able to weave them together, but yeah.
I mean, it's really, I feel like I feel I get it, and it actually,
it's like, yeah, no, I'm just like, do you understand what I'm saying? I don't know if that made any sense.
I think so, and I feel like it feels really resonant. When you said, like, I feel like I don't, you were like, I'm involved, and yet it feels like I'm not doing enough. I feel like I've heard that. I feel like I've heard that for the past 2 weeks from friends and comrades, and yet, I mean, I'll just say, I think that people are tremendously inspired. Like those of us who recognize the importance of radical ideas are really inspired by book club, and so I really, I mean, I'll say for myself, I've come into an understanding that, our movement, our struggle needs so many things, and it's not going to be just one thing. It's a whole ecosystem. It's a whole convergence, a whole constellation of elements, and we're kind of getting toward the end of our time. And I was wondering, actually, I wanted to ask both of you, when you think about where our struggle is now and where we need to go, I'm curious what elements you think we really need, and it doesn't mean that, in this call, we have to identify the sum total.
What do we need to do right now?
What precisely do we? But I'm so curious for people who think about this a lot, and who dedicate yourselves to this. I'm curious about that, and I will say so many. I won't. We're kind of nearing the end of time, so I won't go through individually. But a lot of the questions spoke to that, of like, I'm a radical. Right. I don't know how to move this. Do you know what I mean? And so I'm curious for the two of you. Yeah, what do you think we need more of? What do you think we need to build and grow?
Can I go first, just to get it? Because it's like, I think. I want to kind of just speak in terms of the we that is the Black community, because I know there is a larger class struggle that's happening right now. Like, I think COVID and seeing how the government has responded to that crisis has allowed a lot of people to build sort of class solidarity, because the government is saying fuck you to everybody. So that's dope. But in this particular moment, I do want to speak in terms of the Black community and what I would love to see kind of happen there. I think it's cool and it's dope and it's mad crucial to have continuous conversations about like naming certain things, like naming colonialism, naming capitalism, breaking those things down, making those things center focal points. But there's also so much misogyny and violence. And I can't speak to having any sort of a continued revolution when Black women, Black trans women, queer people who identify as femme are being murdered by our community. A little girl just died, like 19 years old, for no fucking reason other than continual misogynoir and patriarchal bullshit. So like for me, it's like, even answering this call, I was like, I don't even really know how I'm feeling to even have this conversation, because half of it is like, as much as I do feel a revolutionary spirit, and I want to fight and I want to be well-read and radical and in the streets for us, at the same time, I almost don't care anymore because we are never protected. So that's a conversation that I would love to see being had simultaneously. Like when we're talking, we can talk about racial capitalism, but we also have to talk about the fact that there's a segment of the Black community that is incredibly vulnerable. Specifically, trans Black women are dying at higher rates than all of us, and they are the most marginalized and the least protected. So if I were to see any level of real conversation, of real growth, I would love to see Black men stepping up, and instead of just, being anti-establishment, I would love to see a moment of like anti-patriarchal energy coming from us, which I don't think I'll ever even see. But that's just where my heart is right now. It's hard to fight for people who do not give a fuck about you. So yeah, sorry, that was a bit, yeah.
I'm so grateful for that. I mean, I think that's really critical.
Yeah, that's what I would like to see. Because the general revolution is like, how are we going to do that if there is unaddressed harm in our own communities? What type of world are we rebuilding if we're not tearing down patriarchy and like in heteronormative violence? You know what I mean? Like violence against specific groups based off of like heteronormative ideas and shit. Like I had to check my own transphobia, and I didn't even realize I had this shit. Like, and this, you know, when I was getting radicalized, just thinking about how we socialize, like how in our communities we've been socialized. And if we're gonna work hard to dismantle white supremacy and we're gonna constantly name that, I just want to see Black men stepping the fuck up. Like, and I hate to pin it on y'all, like I really do, but at a certain point, it's like I don't see Killer Mike holding press conferences about Black trans women and Black girls who are going missing and being murdered. You know, I don't see T.I. or any of our Black representatives, Obama included, really having these conversations. So whatever sort of continuation we have in a liberation struggle, if that's not addressed, and I want to be like, I'm not going to do it. Like, I'm not going to fight. But obviously I'm Black and I love her so much that I will. But I feel like that's just what Black women do all the time, you know? Like, just keep going for y'all. And y'all are just never there. And this is not y'all like you two, obviously. Fuck with you guys. But yeah, sorry, I'm off just ranting at this point.
Not at all. I mean, I just feel like, I mean, I'll just like, if we're not talking about and doing the things that you're talking about, then like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Facts.
What is this for?
Literally.
And I would like to say that I think that the hope in making that the fight happen, the fight against patriarchy happen is making sure people are in struggle. So the idea, try to make this quick. One thing that happened when we did this, when I went and observed this Watsonville cannery workers strike, it was Mexican workers, Portuguese workers, and Filipino workers, and they had this long history of fighting each other, like big battles and fights and stuff, just the community, right? And one went on strike and the other ones wouldn't, and this and that, and it went back. And then all of a sudden you had this time when people had said this is in the 80s, like, okay, we're going to strike together. And only then were they like, well, we got to figure this out. You know what I'm saying? Because I believe in and because they were like, in order to win, we have to stop fighting each other, right? Now, the thing is that I believe a lot of people don't think we can win anyway. So they I don't think anybody thinks of that consciously, but you know what I'm saying? Like, I think, how do you give somebody the reasoning to fight patriarchy? And I'm just talking about somebody who doesn't care about it at all. I think part of it is calling it out, but part of it is them having this, seeing that there's a benefit in fighting for that part of the community that's not protected, right? And you only get that when people are involved in a struggle. You only not that it always happens, because it doesn't, but you have to have you have to have people involved in the first part, which is like, look, we can't win if there's the one part that this is morally wrong and this is that this is reprehensible, but how do you get people to take it as this is something we need to have a campaign about, this is something we need to do? And I think that comes from all people being, seeing there being an ability and a need for this revolutionary change.
Don't you think that also comes from culture, from the dominant narratives of culture, from the lyrics and music, the images on television? Don't you think if we're not creating a cultural shift away from violence against people who identify as femme, then I think, obviously revolution can happen from the ground up, but I think a lot of these ideas came from the top down anyways.
Yeah.
So why not that, I don't know. I don't want to just pin it on us needing leadership, but I know that there's men who are literally going to all of these protests who are technically in the struggle, who still have the same misogynoir and patriarchy that they have not dismantled, because they're going out to fight because they're protesting about Black Lives Mattering, but they're really out there for George Floyd. Like, they really are specifically out there for a particular Black identity that they've seen stripped, and they want whatever sort of catharsis or whatever in that moment. I don't think it's coming from a collective idea of true Black solidarity and real, like, Black revolutionary action. Because for me, like, that's everybody. That's disabled folks. That's anybody who is on the spectrum. If you are, like, and when I say the spectrum, I shouldn't use that word, but like anybody who is Black existing in different variations of whatever that could look like, they should be coming with us. And I don't know.
And so that's
who are leading these organizations who still have patriarchy and misogyny. Well, I can't say that, being attached to the struggle is about to get you, unlearning and untethering yourself to these fucking ideas.
No, I don't think so either. But I'm saying, like, the argument against patriarchy is one that is founded on certain ideas. And those ideas are revolutionary ideas, actually, right? Like, people have, like, if you're won over to this sort of dog-eat-dog mentality of capitalism, you're not about, if I'm won over, you're not about to have an argument with me that I'm going to even care about that stuff, right? And that doesn't mean that because I'm, a revolutionary, that now I care about patriarchy and sexism. No, but that means that now that if somebody's there, all I'm saying, if they're there, you have the basis to struggle with them on, and that just means we struggle with them. But the question is just like, the struggle has to happen now, but it doesn't mean, like, I don't think you were saying this of yourself. That doesn't mean don't be involved in the struggle. That means be involved in the struggle and struggle with them around patriarchy, and not just you. Not just you struggle with them, but there has to be a struggle involved in that. But I would also like to say this, that there is, and because we're talking specifically about Black folks, and I just want to say this, that often, and just because this is a public forum, often there's this, and I just want to say, there's this conception that Black men are more sexist than white men.
Oh, I'm not saying that at all.
Yeah. And so, and I want to, there's all sorts of stats that prove that. So that's all but so the reason that we're talking about that is because
but I do know that trans women are murdered more predominantly by Black men than any other category. I'm not saying Black men are the most sexist, but I'm saying that they are targeting trans women more than any other male existing in this country right now. Like, that's the statistics.
Okay, I don't know that, but yeah, thank you for telling me that.
Black trans women are likely to get murdered in their neighborhoods and violated in their communities, as opposed to like some, fucking Ku Klux Klan member coming and murdering them. It's us.
Yeah. And I can I just say, like, I appreciate too, like, because it's, I mean, I think that everybody should figure out where you fit in this struggle and be active. Absolutely. But what Noname, it's also like, those of us who are in the struggle, what are we doing to compel, you know what I mean? Black women and trans folks and like queer folk, like, what are we doing to make it clear that their liberation's at the center?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, that's on us.
And I think that definitely has to be done. And so I was just trying to say that someone doesn't have to get out of the struggle. Like Noname was saying, like, I know it was.
I know. It's not even that I want to get out. It's just, it's hard to fight for a group of people who don't give a fuck about me or see my value beyond a sexual object. Like, it's hard to fight when they're literally murdering people who look exactly like me. Like,
right.
Toyin literally could have been my little sister. She was 19 years old. You know what I mean? Like, we're talking about girls. So
then the question becomes, if the project is larger social change, you spoke to culture, like it coming down. And I have a thing that I like to say, that is, fishing villages create fishing songs, right? Culture is known from everybody from revolutionaries to sociologists to anthropologists, as culture is something that is created in order for us, that is created and comes from the way that we survive. So if you're a fishing village, you're going to be singing fishing songs, and you want people to stop singing those fishing songs. You can teach them an agricultural song. Teach them agriculture. They might like the tune, they might blah, blah, blah. But one, they're not going to stop fishing. Two, they're going to start changing the melodies of those agricultural songs to being about fishing, right? What culture doesn't like come out of thin air. Like, these things are created from very material things. So it's a struggle that if we're talking about changing the culture, we have to change those material things at the same time, because we're not gonna just all of a sudden have a non-patriarchal culture without having a society that's non-patriarchal, and that's all intertwined into the material ways that we live. So it's not like you do one struggle before the other. You can't separate. There is, it's intrinsically tied. Racism, patriarchy, and capitalism. They all need each other. And in order, and you end up seeing, like, you see cultural producers, that kind of get involved in stuff, and they want to start saying things, and they come from but they don't, their whole life has been geared toward a certain thing. So it ends up being, like, oh, why'd you say that? They're trying to figure it out, but it's not going to happen. We'll create the artists that we need when we have, when a 12-year-old sees, 200 people moving their furniture back in while the police are evicting them. That 12-year-old is going to start growing up and making a certain kind of art, right? But so far, the art that we have has come from a certain movement. Like, I didn't just start saying what I'm saying just because I thought it was nice. I probably would be doing something, making some other kind of art if I hadn't actually been involved in a movement. So we have to create the movement that creates the artist, that creates the culture that we need. But it's not like a ABC 1, 2, 3 sort of thing. It all has to happen at the same time.
I agree. Well, if it's going to happen at the same time, then I think people need to be having conversations with their homeboys and wherever you are with your male friends and comrades. I think those conversations need to be had. But at the same time, I do think certain aspects of culture do get perpetuated from the top down. And, we're probably never going to see that, and that's okay. But yeah, I guess that was my long-winded answer for what I personally would like to see. And again, I don't want people to go away like, Noname not about to, be for Black liberation, because, Black men pretty much do not step the fuck up, in my personal opinion. I shouldn't generalize, but I am, and I don't care. Oh no, go ahead.
Yeah, no, but how are we going to achieve liberation if, I can't agree with you. How can we? I can't agree with you more. Like, how can we achieve Black liberation if it's not all Black liberation. You know what I mean?
That's what it should be. That's what it is. It's
yeah.
a collective, uprising for all of us, for the purpose of existing in our fullest human capacity and shit. So if we can't even represent those examples in our own communities, it's just going to be difficult. It's going to be difficult to maintain and be waging two wars. Like, it's counterproductive. Like, women shouldn't have to be going up against y'all. We should just specifically be focusing on empire, like, wouldn't it, oh my God, that'd be so nice if we could just, take down one of the isms, if we could just take down one of them and like go from there. But
it is something that is what needs to be part of a revolutionary agenda. It's never talked about. It's never really talked about or addressed. It's always Black organizers, Black women, trans women, organizers who are pushing the conversation through, who are the ones organizing specific marches and protests to honor trans women who have been murdered. It's never Black men. It never is. Even in terms of social media posting, simple things. People love to go, and I do it, but I try to hold space for both. But folks will love to have their political post and be explaining to their audience what these systems mean and breaking them down, and we can have like nuanced conversation about the Democrats and the Republicans and and never, it's rare that I will ever see a Black person, a Black man who has a pretty substantial platform, willing to post a picture, an image of a trans woman who's been murdered, just to continue to push and raise awareness, or to have a conversation on their platform to be like, hey, I'm gonna just take 30 minutes and tweet out or post a little something that you can read about how I feel about what's happening to these people, these members who I love in my community. I think some of it, just speaking honestly for myself, for instance, so we've been doing this I've been doing this as a public figure since the early 1990s. And I often got approached by groups being like, man, why aren't you talking about Black on Black violence? Right? Why aren't you talking
Black on this? I'm not framing this as Black on Black violence. I don't even believe in that.
Yeah, this is where I'm going with that. And at the time, I wasn't as aware of the lies about Black on Black violence, right? I wasn't as aware about, because many of us believed it. What we know now is, for instance, in 1950, there was 50% more Black on Black violence than there is today. And then in 1970, there was 75. It went up to 1970 and has been going down since 1970. But we all got raised on like movies like Colors and all this kind of stuff. And so I think people are trying to figure out, how do you talk about these things? Not say people, I won't put it on, like how do you talk about these things?
Talk about them.
No, I'm saying, I'm talking about the answers to it. How do you talk about the answers to it? Because you never see me bringing up a something without me feeling like.
So everything that you publicly talk about, you have a configured answer.
An idea of what I think is the answer, right? It's usually what I'm talking. Like, I'm never going to be like, Black kids aren't learning math enough. Boom, you know what I'm saying? Like,
what's a hard answer about us not murdering members of our community?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that's definitely not what I'm saying. That's not hard. The question is, how do because what I'm involved in is building narratives, right? How do and for better or worse, to greater or less success, like I'm involved in trying to build a narrative. And I think that just putting up that this murder happened and needs to not happen, I'd say it's not enough. I would say it's not enough.
I'd say it's a start. I say that's better than someone dying in the shadows. So maybe enough. It's not going to be enough until the murders stop completely, in my personal opinion. Until people are not being hunted, it won't be enough. But I think the erasure is a violence within itself. in my personal opinion.
So here goes my thing. So this is just being real. Here's the complicated thing then. If you're saying these murders need to stop, many people use that as a call for more police to stop those murders.
So then it's like, how do we do this on our terms?
Yeah.
You know, I think we have an opportunity. Like if we're talking about abolition, you know.
But we're talking about the murders that police have done, right? I don't really see cause for more police right now. When we talk about those murders, that's not what the conversation becomes. I think that's unfair to just assume that people will immediately be like, well, if we center this narrative, it becomes about bringing in more agents of the state. I think.
And I'm not saying don't center the narrative. I'm talking about how you do it, right? Because a specific thing was brought up.
People aren't even willing to post about it. It won't happen at all. We can't even have a public discourse about it for real in a space where we're really engaging Black men and bringing Black trans women to the table to openly continue this narrative.
And to be clear, to be clear, I've posted about stuff specific.
No, this was not.
But I'm just talking about I'm talking about, you know, how this and that's why I connected it to how people were handling the Black on Black violence thing, right? Because that ended up becoming one of the things that got the crime bill passed, right? And how it was talked about was just in terms of, you know, these particular actions. And here is something where I'm talking about it. I don't have an answer to it. I'm just saying that I think when we're talking about it, we got to talk about what the answer to it is. Because if you just do it, then if you just say this happened and it shouldn't happen without being like, how do we, here are some ways to stop it, you know, then I think you just, then it sometimes just gets used as, let's bring more police in and stop this thing. These folks are wild and they need to be tamed.
Yeah, I don't think there are conversations that are happening. It's just men are not in them. And the Black feminists who are leading these conversations, it's never coming from that standpoint. I think we can't have a conversation that's gonna usher in answers if we haven't even started creating an environment where we're recognizing that this is fundamentally disgusting and morbid and wrong. And I think that just comes from conversation. Half the time when I'm talking to my niggas about police, we're not coming up with ways to dismantle capitalism. We're at least just in a cathartic moment understanding that this isn't right. Like, this has to be changed. This is fundamentally not how we should be living. So I think let's step back away from like what the answer is, and let's just have a general conversation where we're changing the norm, the normality of this happening and the silence around it. I think that's a start. I think shying away from it because we don't have a definitive, way to resolve it is just, it's not.
No, I don't think to shy away from it, but I think to specifically say that the answer isn't more police, right? To specifically say that there are these other things to do, right?
Yeah. We don't want more people. I'm never advocating for more people to be arrested, especially Black, brown, indigenous folks ever. But I cannot not say something about the fact that folks are being fucking killed, you know?
No, I mean, it's also the same reason I don't, you don't see me talking about gun control and stuff like that, because it's really like, how are you talking about it? What does it mean? And without giving a radical solution, it ends up being.
I wouldn't really equate those two, but I feel you. I definitely feel you.
Gun control, here goes something that people will tweet about. Gun control laws end up just bringing more police, and Black folks are the ones that end up just being arrested and in jail because of it. But it's a talking point that ends up happening, and it's not because it doesn't come from a problem, but how we talk about it is the way that we make sure we get the radical change that we need. So that's all.
Let's talk about it.
Yeah. And like I said, I've posted about these murders, and it's specifically, I mean, not these, but, I've posted about murders of trans women. But I'm just saying that I think that we say that that's enough, but it's something that needs to be done, from a radical perspective of what we think the answer might be, or what the answer isn't.
It's so, yeah, and it sounds like, Noname, you referenced some conversations that are happening, and I want to kind of give it to you. We can kind of leave on that note. I just wanted to appreciate this whole conversation, but in particular, the direction it took really is like Noname is challenging us to expand, because what Boots is, what you're saying is real. Like, there's been so much invested to always try to redirect our conversations about our freedom back into reaffirming the structures that oppress us. But we have an opportunity now to go further. And, Noname, I just appreciate that you're saying, if we're going to go further, we have to go all the way further.
Yeah, that's radical. That's radical. Yeah.
Right. I feel,
yeah, I agree with that.
Trans folks at the center, and I just want to get this in there before I give it back to you, is I do believe there is an ongoing conversation on the left about oppression in general.
Right.
About racism and sexism and transphobia and homophobia. And we know who gets left out the most, right? Folks you're saying, you know what I mean? Like trans women of color in particular, trans folks.
Yeah.
Right. And this conversation is like, I all the time I hear, look, we'll eventually get to all the people who experience these different forms of oppression, but for now we need unity, and that means let's get together on what we can all agree on. And so let's maybe not rock the boat by talking about.
To be clear, that's not what I was putting forward. Absolutely.
No, it's clear where you stand, but I think this is an issue on the left, and that's why I'm glad that, you know what I mean? Like, both of you are grappling with, how do we take this as far as it can go, and as far as it needs to go. So, maybe I can give it to you to for the conversations that, whether it's existing conversations that you want to plug folks into, whether it's readings that folks can check out, sure. How do we take this further?
I think for me, Black feminism has helped me a lot, because I think what's beautiful about it is that it has a history in focusing on multiple levels of oppression at once. I think a lot of the times, because to be a Black woman, you are already existing in that, intersectionality of these different ways that society has oppressed you. So the framework around that has always been attacking the multitude of isms that come under capitalism at the same time, like to be able to hold space for both, because I think if you're not able to do that, then you're not really dismantling white supremacy in the way that you think you are. And so that's at least how I've been navigating my politics, is just continuously challenging myself in every moment. And even if you don't want to go and read a bunch of Black feminists, which I would highly suggest that you do, the Black radical tradition, just Google that and just read. But
would you recommend authors in that Black feminist tradition?
Probably like Audre Lorde, Angela Davis. I would recommend her work. I would recommend Our Prison's Obsolete. I would recommend Mariame Kaba. She is a abolitionist organizer. She's amazing. She just wrote a piece in the Times. She's incredible. I would recommend reading her work. That's more so towards the abolition side. But even thinking about abolition, I don't even think people even understand the context that this work has literally been refined and pushed through by Black feminists, like coming from Black feminist theory, something as radical and kind of abrasive to society as abolition. That's where that work is coming from. So me personally, if I am going to be a part of a revolution, I would rather be a part of a revolution that's led by that sort of a politic. But I would encourage people to tap in with that, and to know that it's okay to not be right. I'm wrong all the time. I'm constantly learning and relearning and unlearning. So, but we have to do the work, like we actually have to be radical, and it hurts. Like it hurts to especially like as a public figure or whatever, like it really hurts to be called out for the fuck shit that I've said. But at the same time, I know that I wouldn't be able to be an effective person in my community if I wasn't. And yeah, we're not going to have a movement if there's segments of the our Black community that are refusing to stand in solidarity with the full totality of the fucking community, because they know that there's a likelihood they will be harmed in these moments. Right. And there's a community that does not stand with them truly. So if people are really for revolution, I don't think it's going to happen with a couple of us. So yeah, read Black feminists. That's my last thing to say. Yeah.
Beautiful. Okay, we have
Sadia Hartman. Am I saying that right? Yes. I'm just getting into her stuff. She's another one, very difficult for me sometimes, but brilliant. Yeah, definitely brilliant for sure.
Beautiful. So thank you both so much for just taking this time. Clearly people wanted this conversation. The conversation that we ended up having, to me, was even more moving and urgent, I think, than what I anticipated having. So thank you both. I know we got Aja Monet is coming in with some poetry in shortly at 7 o'clock Eastern.
Okay.
So we have to wrap up, but let me before I close, just remind people again, if you're in a position to make a donation, no matter how small, please consider giving to Haymarket Books into the Atlanta Solidarity Fund. Support our comrades in Atlanta. Sign up for Noname's book club. And register now for upcoming events with Katrina Johnson, Michael Bennett, Nikita Oliver, and Jesse Hagopian tomorrow, June 16th. And then Ibram X. Kendi and Dereka Purnell on June 18th on Raising Anti-Racist Kids. Once again, tune in tonight in just a few minutes for Homemade, an online poetry event for the people with Aja Monet. Starts at 7 o'clock Eastern, and the link will be posted again in the chat. Thanks again to Mirabai Knight for doing live closed captioning. Incredible. Thank you to Haymarket Books, of course, for organizing this live stream and all these other conversations. Thanks to everybody who joined us on this call. And thank you both so much.
And I want to say thank you to Noname for being part of this conversation and just being really brave in your taking hold of your own development and your own output, and you're inspiring, because of it. So and I think, even though you said your work you wouldn't call radical, I think it was the work you wouldn't call radical is very honest about yourself, right? And at least I think. I have no idea. You could.
No, it is. Yeah. No, it's honest. Yeah.
And I think that is an extension of what led you to where you are right now. So.
I appreciate that. I'm grateful that we were able to have a pretty. It got a little spicy. A little spicy conversation.
Oh, it did? That must have been like that medium spice for people.
But yeah, no, I'm grateful for you guys. I'm grateful to be in, this virtual community. And yeah, I think hopefully we'll be able to do something like this again, maybe. This was dope.
Yeah. I just, I feel like in the chat, people were asking, like, how do we challenge the people around us? And I feel like we were able to challenge ourselves in this conversation.
Facts. So, yeah. So talk to people. Talk to each other. Yes.
Definitely.
Word. Thank you both so much. And
thank you.
Be in touch. Everybody stay safe.
You too.
Wash your hands. Wear a mask. And let's abolish police.
Hey.
All right.
Oh, yeah.
And trans liberation and women's liberation. Let's go.
Thank you.
Peace.